Hey everyone. Ever told a little white lie? Like to get out of a speeding ticket or maybe to avoid hurting someone's feelings. We all have, right?
You're right.
But you've sent us this Medicine Net article, and it's about those who take it way too far. Pathological versus compulsive liars. And let me tell you, after reading this thing, I am starting to question every story I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's really interesting. This article highlights that not all liars are created equal.
Oh, okay.
There are some subtle differences in their motivations, the lies they tell, and even how their brains are wired.
So first things first, how does this article even define these two types of liars?
Well, it points out right away that even the terms, right, pathological liar and compulsive liar, are often used interchangeably.
I see.
There's not really a universally agreed upon medical distinction. But generally, a pathological liar is someone who lies frequently, often with a specific goal in mind, like manipulating a situation to their advantage.
So it's less about the lie itself and more about the intent behind it, like a means to an end.
Exactly.
Okay.
On the other hand, compulsive liars seem to lie more out of habit,
Okay.
even if there's no clear benefit or gain.
Ah, I see.
Imagine someone who embellishes every story, making themselves the hero every time.
Yeah.
Even when it makes them look bad or contradicts something they said earlier, it's like they can't help themselves.
Ah, so it's about the pattern, not just the occasional fib. But how can you tell if someone's like a smooth-talking manipulator versus just like bad at remembering details?
Well, that's where things get tricky. And that's one reason why diagnosing someone as a pathological or compulsive liar is so complex. I mean, there's a lot to unpack. But this article that you sent, it points to research suggesting that there might actually be structural differences in the brains of pathological liars.
Wait, really? Like their brains are literally different. Tell me more.
It is pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
So they tend to have more white matter in their prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that deals with language and processing information quickly.
Okay, so more white matter equals what? Like a super-powered lying machine?
Not quite.
Okay.
Think of it this way. They may be able to weave more complex and believable lies because their brains they're wired for fluent verbal communication.
Okay, I'm with you.
But here's the catch. They also tend to have less gray matter in the prefrontal cortex. And that's associated with things like impulse control and moral reasoning.
Ah, so they might be great at spinning a yarn, but not so great at stopping themselves from doing it in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like having a sports car with a faulty brake pedal.
Okay, now that's an analogy I can get behind.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, which came first? The lying or the brain differences? Like, did all that fibbing actually change their brain structure?
That is a question researchers are still trying to answer.
Yeah.
It's a classic chicken or the egg dilemma.
Yeah.
And it highlights just how much we still don't know about these behaviors.
Right.
It's also why neither pathological nor compulsive lying is officially recognized as a standalone mental disorder. So diagnosing and treating them effectively, well, it remains a real challenge.
Okay, so we've got these definitions, and now we've taken a peek inside the brains of liars. But let's get real. How do you spot one in the wild? Like, say you've got a coworker who spins these elaborate stories that seem too good to be true. Pathological liar, right?
Well, it's tempting to jump to conclusions, but, remember, it's not always easy to label someone just based on, like, a few stories.
Right.
But we all embellish sometimes.
Yeah.
The key here is to look for those patterns of behavior.
Okay.
Does your coworker consistently create, like, these elaborate stories even when there's no clear benefit? Do their stories often fall apart under scrutiny? This would be red flags.
So like my uncle who swears he won a hot dog eating contest back in college, but no one can ever find any proof. Is he off the hook?
Huh. It depends.
Okay.
A one-off, tall tale doesn't necessarily make someone a pathological or compulsive liar. We're talking about a persistent pattern of behavior, and it often has, significant consequences for that person and those around them.
Right, those consequences. That makes sense. So let's talk about what actually causes these types of lying. The article mentions both nature and nurture being involved, right? What's the deal with that?
It's rarely ever just one thing,
Right.
The article suggests that early childhood experiences, especially those involving like trauma or instability, could play a role.
Okay.
Think about it. If you grow up in an environment where lying is a necessary survival skill, it could become almost second nature.
That makes sense, yeah. But then we've also got those intriguing brain differences that we talked about earlier. Does that muddy the waters a bit?
It certainly adds another layer of complexity. It makes you wonder if those structural differences were always there, like predisposing someone to these behaviors. Or did the act of lying itself somehow shape their brain over time? It's a bit of a scientific mystery.
Man, it's like we're trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are missing. So given all of this, how can you tell if someone is dealing with these deeper issues or if they're just, a jerk?
That's a question for the professionals, honestly.
Yeah.
Diagnosing someone as a pathological or compulsive liar requires a thorough evaluation by a mental health expert.
Okay.
But there are things we can all learn from this.
Right.
It's less about, slapping labels on people and more about just understanding the complexities of human behavior.
I like that. Less labeling, more understanding. But let's get practical for a second. Say you suspect you're dealing with someone who might fall into one of these categories. What can you actually do about it?
Well, the article gives some good advice, actually. It all starts with setting healthy boundaries.
Okay.
You can't control someone else's behavior, but you can control how you respond to it.
So, like, no more loaning them your lawnmower after they borrowed it last time and it came back with a broken handle.
Well, that's one way to set a boundary.
Okay.
But it can also be about setting limits in conversations.
Right.
You can choose not to engage in discussions that revolve around, lies or manipulation. You can even limit contact with that person if necessary.
That's got to be tough, especially if it's someone you care about. But I get it. Sometimes you have to protect yourself.
Exactly. It's crucial to prioritize your own well-being in these situations. You can't force someone to change. But you can make choices that protect you from the negative impacts of their behavior.
It's amazing how much this deep dive has made me question everything I thought I knew about lying. It's way more complex than just telling the truth or not, that's for sure.
It really is, yeah. And this article, it even touches on how technology might change the game entirely.
Oh, really?
Yeah, think about like lie detector tests. They're already used in some settings, but they're far from foolproof.
Right, and then there's all this talk about artificial intelligence being able to, analyze things like micro-expressions or even someone's voice patterns to sniff out deception. It's like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does feel kind of futuristic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But as this technology, becomes more sophisticated, we have to actually consider the implications.
Right.
What happens when AI can read our minds better than we can ourselves?
Whoa.
Where do we draw the line between, truth-seeking and invading someone's privacy?
Those are some seriously big questions. It's like we're on the verge of a world where lying might become impossible. Is that the kind of world we want to live in?
It's definitely something to ponder.
Yeah.
As we uncover more about the hows and the whys of lying, we also need to think about, the ethical ramifications. Technology might be able to give us the tools to detect deception, but it's up to us to decide how to use those tools responsibly.
It's a lot to unpack, for sure, but that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating. This one has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's a good reminder that human behavior is rarely black and white.
True.
There are always layers of complexity.
Right.
And the more we learn, the more we realize just how much we don't know.
Well said. And to our listeners out there, we'll leave you with this. As our understanding of lying evolves and as technology gives us these new tools to detect it, how will you navigate this increasingly complex landscape of truth and deception? It's a question worth pondering. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.